Our clothes, as a mirror, reflect the history of civilization. It is more than a second layer, as nowadays, fashion and style became the way of self-expression. Seeing deep symbolism in surrounding material things, speaking via things and rituals is absolutely in Kazakh style. That is why the history of national costume is an incredible world, exposing our mentality. In today's program, Scythian style yesterday, journey of waistcoat and ruffles, step masters of epitage, almost every person's wardrobe has something that used to be called a dress suit, but now it is going out clothes. Some bet on the haute couture piece. Some prefer items from new pret-a-porter collection. Others want to stand out by wearing vintage pieces. Some may think that in the past nomads had only worn trousers and malakai, fur cap with large ear flaps. Since so little material culture things were preserved, and the nomadic lifestyle did not imply storing and changing outfits for different occasions, except perhaps for the top of the nomadic nobility. The more striking are some facts from the history of both national and modern clothing. Dress suit is in the center of attention. What do the Beatles have in common with Scythian clothing? How did the waistcoat wander around the world? And how did step dandies amaze people? "55 years ago, Beatlemania begun. Songs of the Liverpool Quartet even penetrated through the Iron Curtain of the Soviet Union. In addition to its own musical style, the group had a vivid image. Beatles' hairstyle and their jacket, without a collar and labels, immediately became fashionable. It would seem that there is no relation between faraway England and ancient nomads. With the help of experts, Oriental Vintage took a closer look at British costume. We can say that jacket without labels, the Beatle jacket, is also a Saka invention, the so-called Saka jacket. However, when the Beatles jacket came in fashion, we did not recognize it, did not recognize the tailored model, and did not understand that in fact it is our item. Our ancestors created the first truly tailored costume. It should be recalled that at that time, in the most developed civilizations of Europe, ancient Greek and later Roman, there were no tailored clothing. They only had some gowns they covered themselves with. Steppe people were in desperate need of specialty tailored clothing, which was convenient for production processes such as military affairs, horse riding, etc. Thus, our ancestors became the creators of such clothes. The cultural period of the 1960s is sometimes called the Revolution of Peacocks. Young people became interested in fashion. They wore bright printed shirts, unusual ties, and tight trousers. Before that period, business suit was the basis of the men's wardrobe. Going out set, also called the three-piece, was formed in the beginning of the 19th century, when Europeans began to wear a frock coat or a tailcoat with a vest and long pantaloons. Over time, a frock coat and a tailcoat were replaced with a jacket and pantaloons with classic trousers. Only waistcoats remained true to itself. The history of its origin also surprisingly refers to the time of the ancient nomads. The so-called French vests are also the invention of Turks. The journey of this clothing item through the countries and parts of the world is very curious. Having become the property of Turkish pirates, who at one time owned almost dominated the Mediterranean, the waistcoat became part of a famous uniform. By the way, pirates were portrayed wearing them. Then, having got into French costume, the becoming part of the famous men's classic three-piece, this vest gradually began to move through Russia, through the Tatars, and to the steppe. And somewhere in the late 19th, early 20th century, the vest appeared in the steppe and our people did not recognize it. Take a look at this almost conductor's tailcoat. This is truly a dress suit. Archaeologists discovered it during the evacuation of the mounds of Altai. Nomadic tribes who lived before our era came up with tailed fur coats so that it would be more comfortable to horse ride. This find was called Katandinsky tailcoat. There is no doubt that nomads were excellent clothing designers. In terms of special going-out outfit, the Kazakh nomadic culture had a unique example of steppe dandies who were called sal-seri. They were an embodiment of Bohemia. They were creative people with eccentric behavior who had their amazing history of origin, their dressing style, their style of poetic utterance, their manner of communicating with people. Because they stand above this world, they are outside the social sphere, and specific military combat and social functions. Therefore, sal-seri represent a special layer who were at the origin of our theoretical culture.
И поэтому сало-сера представляет собой особый пласт нашей театральной культуры, истоков казахской театральной культуры.
Let me distinguish differences so that you understand. Sali are the highest type of aesthetic principle in the Kazakh artistic culture. They are considered as part of art. Seri accompanies sal. Therefore, sal dress much brighter. They can dress non-standardly. For example, wear women's clothes or dress like children. Their whole appearance said that they are above this world. They are beautiful. If we take the way of Abai, Sal had the whole squad. For example, Birjan Sal had a squad on white horses. It was like white snow. Imagine white horses in Mukhtar Awezov's novel, The Way of Abai. The scene is marvelous as when the squad escorts Birjan, it looks like a white sea. Akuns are in Sal's squad. Squad could consist of 15 to 20 Akuns, a large number of beautiful, elegantly dressed girls on horses. The theater was better than gypsy ones. Imagine beautiful scene, floating white horses.
Это, не знаю, цыганам таких театров не снилось. Это такая красота. То есть вот по Качеве как бы духи плывут.
Researcher Zhanabayev is convinced that the modern fashion show cannot be compared with the riot of colors and unusual shapes that dandies brought to everyday life. And if we continue the analogies with the haute couture, then it should be noted that, according to the works of scientists Alkay Margulan and Yediget Tursinov, the look of Seri was always elegantly restrained, but Sal allowed themselves extravagance both in clothes and behavior. Extract from Mukhtar Awezov's novel, The Way of Abai. The famous singer Seri Birjan came to the lands of Tobikti from the faraway land Kokshetau. He sat throwing black velvet chapan, robe-style coat, on his shoulders, plucking dombra with skillful hand. On top of a white shirt with a negligently unbuttoned collar, he was wearing a golden camisole of Chinese silk. On his head, he wore an embroidered cap with a silk tassel, trembling with every movement of the singer. There are different descriptions that they like bright colors. For example, bright blue. They could wear something out there just to be noticed. For example, a 6-meter veil, bright blue silk or velvet a garment, a camisole. In general, their clothes were very richly decorated and beautiful. Sal dressed brightly. He was the master of the world. He could have a rose in his mouth. Seri dressed more strictly, and they were aristocrats of the spirit. Steppe dandies were not just creative people, masters of epitage, but also designers. They wore extraordinarily wide trousers, headgear decorated with bunches of owl feather, which in fact served as a guard for children and young girls. Some even made themselves a headdress in the Saukilere style. Their outerwear consisted of multicolored and dissimilar rags. Thai were striking people, wandering creators, knights, bearers of a magical origin. They were bearers of spirituality and beauty, that they were equal to theater. With their clothes, behavior, attitude to the world, attitude towards nature, to people, to enemies, to friends. That is, they were fighting units. At the right moment, they went into battle. They had artistic attitude to life and death. In ancient times, they were members of secret male unions, engaged in magic and fortune-telling. From here, they had their own funds. They were very rich. Not everyone could enter such unions. Therefore, they were rich, dressed exquisitely. They behaved however they wanted, as they understood they could die tomorrow. They were heroes. The luxurious attire of the Eastern rulers and their wives is what the Chinese, Arab, and European travelers first described. Anyone who came here for the first time turned out to experience a cultural shock. For example, Marco Polo even called his composition the Book of Miracles. When you read the notes of other pilgrims, you feel proud of nomads. Guillaume de Rubruck, Flemish traveler of the 13th century. What you should know about their attire and dresses is that silk and gold materials were delivered from China and other Eastern countries. Expensive furs, which I have never seen in our countries, were delivered from Russia, the Great Bulgaria, and other obeying countries. The modern fashion industry dictates fashion lines, trends, styles, but only a few centuries ago, the tastes of nomads were considered at the highest diplomatic level. Red was the king of colors, all shades of red. In the correspondence of the diplomatic missions of Russia Empire with the Hans of the Great Steppe, there was always a mention of red color.
Великой степи обязательно стоял вопрос о красном цвете. Знаете как? Ткани. Вот ткани.
Steppe people asked for red fabrics, especially red crimson, as it was very popular among the nomadic aristocracy. And the Russian diplomatic mission used it all the time. Red crimson was in the first place among the gifts to Hans. All shades of red brought warmth and were a symbol of universal rebirth. In the 18th to 20th centuries, nomadic nobility presented reciprocal gifts to Russian emperors in the form of sets of beautiful clothes, which were a sample of high artistic taste and unique technique. Today, it is the property of the Russian Ethnographic Museum in St. Petersburg. At the same museum in St. Petersburg, I saw a fur coat that stunned me, because I did not see such a fur coat made of ptarmigan's breast anywhere. What kind of outfit did the inner horde last Han's wife choose for the coronation of Nicholas I? Where did the ruffles and Kazakh girls' dresses appear? And how did the cinema and theater affect Kazakh costume? It is the Han's headquarters, inner horde ruler Jangir Khan, who had European education, and his wife Fatima lived there in the 19th century. Many remembered her outfit, ethno-style they would say today, at the Russian emperor reception. At the coronation, she wore an embroidered camisole and kasaba, a headdress of Western Kazakhstan women. Of course, there was a ball in the evening. According to our assumptions, she wore such kind of dress. There is an original dress in the funds of Moscow Museum. However, we lengthened the sleeves of Eastern women. When she was at the ball, she was very young, about 16 years old. Who would have thought that the description of Fatima's dress at the time when nomads changed the traditional costume for the urban one allowed to restore the Kazakh headgear? Ethnographer Uzbek Jibek managed to find the so-called kasaba. One day he gets invited to the State Museum in Almaty to destroy items eaten by a moth. The chairman of the commission reads out list of items to be destroyed. Camisole and kasaba of Fatima Khanum. He immediately jumped up like a scalded one. Where is kasaba? Stopped the liquidation process, invited biologists and asked to help with kasaba restoration. Now it is stored in the State Museum Fund in Almaty. Some Kazakhstanis still take an example from the image of the most famous Kazakh lovers embodied in the cinema, Jibek and Tolygin. They think that is how the nomads dress. However, this is just the works of imagination of the talented artist Gulfaruz Ismailova. By the way, Hollywood did something similar. It depicted all the cowboys with Stetson hats and all Vikings with horned helmets, although initially they both dressed quite differently. Theater also influenced the national clothes. In 1920, Orenburg became the first Kazakh capital. Local novice artists who played in national-themed performances needed suits. It is believed that as a basis, they took what was popular with neighbors. The Tatars, for example, a waistcoat and a dress with a lot of ruffles. According to fashion historians, the Tatars in turn borrowed ruffles from residents of the Voronezh and Tambov provinces. They tried to imitate dress suit of the rich and imitated the layering by sewing additional strips of fabrics along the edge of the clothes. In 1871, the famous artist Vasily Vereshchagin created a picture of Kyrgyz with a falcon and dedicated it to his friend, the supreme leader of one of the Kyrgyz tribes, Baytik Kanayev. The canvas was part of the famous Turkestan series, which Vereshchagin showed at the exhibition in London. To some extent, this picture can be considered an international presentation of the suit dress of a nomad. Notice that this clothing reflects not an ordinary, but rather an ideal way of life. In the 19th century, Kazakh nomads were part of the Russian Empire. New period was reflected on the noble's dress suit. Russian historian Gulbana Isbasarova published archival materials about how uniforms for a nomadic elite were being introduced. The ruler of the inner horde, Jangir Khan, who was in the service of the White Tsar, was the first to wear a uniform. Following the Sultan ruler Akhmet Janturin initiated the creation of a uniform for Kazakh officials. The idea was supported by other sultans, and the Russian authorities developed sketches of uniforms with elements of national clothes. Revolutions and a civil war destroyed both Russian Empire and the Sultan rulers. Their dress suits was moved to the museums. Today, we have a chance, inspired by the inventions of the first nomads, to create a new version of going-out clothing. What would I do as a designer? I would firstly return items that belong to us by right. Do you know that jackets or coats with band collar are also ours? It is not Saka but Turek culture. The fact is that it was during the Tan era when the Chinese were especially keen on the Turek nomadic culture. It was a time when the Chinese emperor finally allowed people to wear pants, and before that there was a ban on wearing pants. Then, fashion for the Turek clothing became literally rampant in China. That is when our jacket with a band collar, it became a national costume. Do you remember Mao Zedong? I would make a very elegant ornament with the finest silk fabrics in a jacket. In general, I really like modest costume, formal jacket, and pants. Ancient Kazakh masters showed ingenuity, combining different materials and colors. Each dress suit was haute couture improvisation. It is a real challenge to modern fashion designers. Women and men's suit in ethnic styles is an excellent creativity field for modern designers.